Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm gonna be walking on a different trail. This is called the Lieber Trail. It's also in Highlands Hammock Park, and gonna do this live, another tour. As you see, we're right smack in the middle of a typical Florida habitat. You have a bunch of sabin palms and oaks, all sorts of stuff like that. And interesting thing about Florida is even though it's relatively flat, even in the scope of, like, let's say you go from here, which is an upland habitat, and then you cross the trail, and here you have a ditch, and there's already wetland type species in there, which is really interesting. And then um, as you walk down further, you could actually feel humidity and the smell pick up. You could feel like something is different. So I'm gonna show you what that is. Typical Florida jungle. Now, a lot of plant species have yet to educate myself on, but like, I have no idea what that is, for example. And here we're crossing over into a completely different territory, and there's a boardwalk there for a reason. You go from upland habitat down to a swampy habitat. So let's take a look. Starts off with a big tree that fell, and that's indicative of a lot of things. Tree rot primarily. So this floods seasonally, as evident by all that gunk in there. More than likely a couple feet here and there. This is one of those places where it flooded once or twice, and then it sort of became a habitat as water channeled its way through. Nowadays it's just nothing but a swamp. Probably local creek took a different path, but this still floods whenever the creek floods. And so as we walk down further, you're gonna see how there's absolutely no water movement anywhere, and yet everything is kind of wet. Civil Conservation Corps have constructed this boardwalk that has to be maintained every now and then. I could hear flies and mosquitoes off in the background somewhere, but amazingly there's just absolutely no other wildlife except for maybe that bird over there. I did see a couple squirrels early on, but those were in the upland territory. If you're gonna notice, there's actual water type vegetation coming up. So some of it is turning into a really good habitat for wetlands and everything. But other than that, you could see how it just sort of flooded here and then it stuck around. The downside to water sticking around, there's a lot of those tree species that you see up here. They're really not suited for being flooded, maybe with the exception of palm trees. Palm trees are absolutely resilient. You're gonna see a lot of them and they're thriving, but every other tree is suffering from tree rot. And as we walk further, I'll show you what that is. Really intricate root system. And this is your typical Florida swampy habitat. You got some palm trees, acacia trees, aspens. Now, some trees are actually doing pretty good, like this one and that one. They're really thick, but a lot of trees are starting to show end of their life cycle. And a lot of the trees that fell inevitably met their demise exactly that very way. The water eats at the core of the tree, rots it away, and then the tree falls. In case you come back, places like this, a prime habitat for water type snakes, like moccasins and everything. So if you look very carefully, you might be able to see them. Another type of animal that likes places like this would be a turtle, and that's about it. This would be a good place to visit at nighttime, but yesterday we got ran off the premises. Me and my neighbors from the campground decided to go for a walk, or rather a ride and then a walk with flashlights and everything. And the park ranger caught on to us. But nighttime, this place would be really eerie. And as you see, palm trees are just doing spectacular here. Off in the background, you get to hear owl. And now we're crossing over to where trees are really dying. When you see massive trees like this, as I walk around, you'll see what I'm talking about. Some water type vegetation. Those things are actually sold in oh, dragonfly. Those things are actually sold in places like Lowe's and Home Depot. And here's a prime example. You see a massive, massive, massive tree. And see how everything is rotted away, suffering from decay? That's exactly how they die. Here's another example. This tree and that tree is all a part of the same tree. It's all eating away on the inside, rotting away, just being held by the outside, where the bark is. And again, really interesting root system. I gotta find out what kind of tree that is. I want to call it a cypress, but it's not a cypress. Have to brush up on my trees a little bit. Another thing, in a place like this, it's gonna be all but impossible for you to find an alligator. Alligators like to thermoregulate, so they need to be out in the sun as much as they need to be in the water. So places like this, he may be passing through, but not necessarily sticking around. It's really, really interesting. Palm trees are so resilient. Like, they adapt to all sorts of habitat. Uplands, wetlands, everything. Look at that. The one over there is actually in the water all the time. The one over there too. See that? Doing pretty good. Now there's a difference between a swamp and a swamp, and I'm gonna show you that difference. The difference between good type of swamp in a wet type of swamp. That type of swamp would be something like this, completely void of sunlight, very dreary looking. But let's have a look at how big of a difference it makes when you have sunlight. Sun is right over there, which is hidden from sight by a walnut tree canopy. And then you get a ton of really skinny trees up here. And see how everything just comes to life, everything is nice and bright. And just like that, between here and there, that's all the difference that it makes. Have a look at that. We're in the same spot, right? Crappy looking, and bam! Just like that. You get all sorts of other vegetative life come up. Everything is luscious and green. On the downside, the trees are looking skimpy. So you have this interesting trade-off between successful trees and other vegetation that comes up. And it's really beautiful, photographer's paradise. You have all sorts of plant species up here if you're into that sort of stuff. Just look how cool it looks. That's all the difference that it makes. Just a little bit of sunlight. All sorts of grasses in the back. Now this would be a perfect place for an alligator to sit. So there's bound to be an alligator in this habitat. They like to sit out in the sun like this, especially early on in the morning, sunbasking. And you have to remember that sun is actually going from there down that way. So all the vegetation that's out here is going to follow the sun. Wow. The trail I'm on right now is called Fern Trail. Such a drastic difference. And then here's another interesting thing. We've gone from rich diversity over there to essentially domination. If you look at whatever this plant is, it dominates all the sunlight, so you're not going to see anything else in there. Which is not a good thing either. Nature requires just the right amount of balance. Now imagine trying to hike through this for the first time. When Civil Conservation Corps came through here, they had to pave the road. And this is all they saw. Somebody had to hack this path through, put the pylons in. Nowadays it's actually easier. They use construction equipment. There's a cool flower over there. I'm gonna take a picture of that. Here's another interesting thing. Other species taking advantage of other species. And that same exact tree, there's another species of plant that's taking use of it. So they just root themselves in there. I think it's some sort of air plant. Or type of air plant, rather. Really, really cool trail. Unfortunately, not every swamp looks like it. Oh, there's the name. It's called Fern Garden Trail. Yep. And again, just within the scope of walking, you have diversity versus crappy. And all it takes is really the sunlight. And then we're crossing over into the upland habitat, and you can see a different type of vegetation species coming up. Just like that. This up here floods seasonally, still has some water pockets over there. And there you go. The rest of the stuff is nothing but palm trees and a bit of remnants of swampy stuff. And back into the upland habitat. Really cool looking. This is what native Florida looks like. Some cool butterflies. I've seen a lot of those in the park.